My name is Andy Labar. I am the Executive Vice President at the Ann Arbor A2Y Regional Chamber. On behalf of our chamber, our President and CEO, Diane Keller, I want to welcome you to our forum tonight. I want to especially thank Russ Olwell, who has left the room with EMU. They were kind enough on less than 2 weeks' notice to give us this great facility. We genuinely appreciate it. Our wonderful member Comcast is kind enough to provide the cookies and lemonade. Please feel free to help yourselves. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight to discuss the Water Street Millage proposal. Appreciate that our Mayor Pro Tem Lois Richardson, Council members Dan Vogt and Pete Murdoch are here. You'll hear from our panelists, including our mayor, a little bit later. Do want to thank them for their willingness not only to be here tonight, but to engage in this issue broadly. And then finally, here at the Chamber, we try and always inform our membership about the important events that are going on in their community and provide the education they want to be able to make an informed choice so that come August 2nd, you can walk into the ballot and have the information you need. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't say this event has been a particular pleasure. I have not had the good fortune of working with the League of Women Voters in my chamber capacity before. They are above excellent. They do this in a volunteer capacity, but they do it with professionalism, dedication, openness, transparency, fairness. I can't thank the League enough for their great work. And so thank you for being here. Thank you to the League for doing such wonderful legwork. I'll turn it over, but let's have a great forum.
Shoshana Ruth Wechter. I'm here on behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area. Again, thank you again to the A2Y Chamber and for Eastern Michigan University for partnering with us on this. And thanks to all the volunteers who helped with everything, filming and everything. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League does not support candidates or parties, but does take a position on issues we have studied. And now I'll turn it over to our moderator this evening, Sue Smith, who is the past president of the League of Women Voters of Michigan.
And thank you everyone for being here. We're going to have a very interesting evening. As was mentioned earlier, the purpose of this forum is to educate voters so that when they go to the polls on August 2nd, they can make an informed choice on the Water Street Millage ballot proposal. I'd like to take a few minutes to just go over the program so everybody knows what to expect. Does everybody have a copy? If you don't have a copy, please raise your hand so that you will know how things are going to transpire. And I would like to call your attention to what we call the rules of the road, which are down at the bottom of the sheet. This just helps to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to participate and that we can have as many people participate as possible. So when we get to the questions, we're going to, as you can see from the program, we're going to start out with presentations by the city and by, we call it Skip, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And then we're going to have the question and answer. I have a couple questions I will be asking each side, so to speak. And then we will open it to questions from the audience. And if you wish to ask a question, please go to the mic. It's standing right there in the back, and you can line up when it's time to ask questions. If you wish to speak, you must be recognized. The audience has 1 minute to ask their question. The response to each question is limited to 2 minutes. And each person in the audience may speak only once until everyone who wishes to has had an opportunity to speak, and assuming there is still time within the allotted time, we will need to stop our forum at 7 o'clock, and we're having, as you can see, closing statements at the end by each side. So I will keep you informed of how much time there is. We have timers, and let me just briefly explain how this will work. The league has these wonderful paddles, so if you're, not to be applied any person, but just to notify people of the amount of time you have left. So if you're asking a question, you have 1 minute to ask a question. The timer will hold up the 30-second paddle when you have 30 seconds left, and the stop when you're done. And I will ask you to finish your sentence, and then please stop when the time is up so that others can have their turn. In terms of answers, there will be 2 minutes allowed for the answer. And in terms of notification, 1 minute before that 2 minutes is up, that paddle will go up, and then 30 seconds, and stop. For the opening and closing, each side has 4 minutes. So 1 minute before the end of the 4 minutes, 1 minute will go up. I'm just checking, Heidi, to see whether you had your morning coffee. Okay, and then 30 seconds before. And then, of course, stop. Okay, so I hope everybody is clear on how we're going to operate this evening so that we can be fair and give as many opportunities for people to learn about this millage proposal as possible. So before the forum, each side drew numbers from a hat to determine the order of speaking in the opening statements and the closing statements. And the city is going to speak first. We have 2 representatives from the city, Mayor Amanda Edmonds, who's been Mayor of Ypsi since 2014. She is the founder and executive director of Growing Hope, and she's a graduate of the University of Michigan. The other speaker for the city is Jelani McCadney. He is currently legislative aide to Representative Jeff Irwin. He is former field representative for Congressman John Dingell and Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. So we're pleased to have these speakers give their time to be here with us tonight so that we can better understand the issues involved. So we're ready to start the presentations, and we will start with the city.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you both to the League of Women Voters and the fabulous group of volunteers, and to our great chamber for giving this opportunity. On August 2nd, we're asking our voters of Ypsilanti to vote yes for our beloved community. Our city council unanimously supports this, which is not often the case, and we are very excited. By voting to pay down the Water Street debt, our city can finally put that burden to rest and focus on moving us forward. Because it's a really exciting time in Ypsilanti. The economy has finally really begun to recover. Property values are recovering. Things are selling. Values are going up. Our commercial districts are vibrant. If you ever come on a First Friday, you can see visitors and residents enjoying all that we have to offer. We've got solar panels popping up all around our community. It's a place, a destination. And we have so many win-win partnerships going with Eastern Michigan University, with Washtenaw Community College, with St. Joseph Mercy Health System, and with our surrounding townships and communities, more than we've had in a long time. It's a really good time in our community. But despite 6 years of economic growth at the state level, the fiscal situation for municipalities and our public school systems across the state is quite different and have taken major hits. So the state has grown, has had this great balanced budget, and it's been balanced on the back of Flint and Detroit Public Schools and Ypsilanti and so many others. So we, as many, took huge hits as a city in the financial downturn, back now 8 years ago, right? Property values plummeted, you know that if you own property here. And of course the city then got much, much, much less tax revenue. But at the same time that the state was growing its pie, they were doing that on the backs of cities. And we have had almost 1 million additional loss every year in state revenue sharing. And our city is still 4.3 square miles, and our city still has about 20,000 residents, and our city still provides police and fire and basic city service, and our city has the same number of miles of roads, and we've done that by cutting and being thrifty and thriftier. But while we are still providing great service and we've been able to start recovering, we have one thing that's really holding us back, and that's the Water Street debt. So many of us, myself included, inherited this debt. When it was last consolidated back in 2006, our total principal and interest owed over the life of 25 years was $29.4 million. So call it $30 million. We've been paying down and paying down and paying down. We were down to about $20 million. So that's a total principal and interest still owed. Our general fund, right, our overall operating budget is about $14 million. And our annual payments have been $1.4 million. So we've been having to pay down Water Street debt about 10% of our budget every year. We know what that does to our savings account, so to speak. And that's been going down and down and down. But through really careful planning and an ounce of good luck with low interest rates, we were finally able to refinance this spring and save from that $20 million, $6 million, and get that down to $14 million. We've been really good at the savings, and we have this opportunity here without raising taxes to add 2.3 mils to our tax levy as we are taking off 2.3 mils from road projects we did many years ago. So without raising taxes, we can drastically reduce that debt. We can stabilize as a community. We can avoid going into levels lower than we're allowed to of our reserves, our saving account, and we can really focus on moving all of this exciting possibility forward as a community.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And now we will turn to the Stop Citizens Increasing Taxes. Mr. Pierce.
Oh, I thought you had an introduction for me.
I'm sorry, I do. And this is what happens when you have too many papers. Representing Stop City Increasing Taxes, or SCIT, is Mr. Steve Pierce, a lifelong progressive and Democrat who has lived in Ypsilanti's South Side with his wife Maggie since 1999. As an active community volunteer, Steve has worked to promote Obama for America, the Ypsilanti Campaign for Equality for LGBTQ rights, the Ypsilanti Transportation Millage to expand bus service, and overall responsible governance in the city of Ypsilanti. Mr. Pierce.
Thank you, Susan. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I have lived in the city of Ypsilanti since 1999. I'm invested in the city and care very deeply about its future sustainability. Tonight I will discuss the proposed Water Street debt millage on behalf of SCIT, Stop City Increasing Taxes. SCIT is a group working to keep Ypsilanti vibrant, livable, and strong. In 2007 and 2012, SCIT played a role in the resounding defeat in the city income tax and Water Street millage. SCIT believes that rejecting higher taxes is best both for the people of Ypsilanti and the long-term viability of our city. SCIT recognizes the fiscal challenges faced by Ypsilanti and that progress has been made. SCIT believes that had we approved past tax increases for Water Street, property values would be lower today and city leaders would have lost the incentive to control costs. Higher property taxes hurt communities and the rate in Ypsilanti is among the highest. Ypsilanti ranks number 7 in the state, placing it in the top 1.5% for property taxes. And Ypsi has the highest taxes in the county, even higher than the city of Ann Arbor. Taxes have increased in Ypsilanti by 22% since 2007. That's $800 more per year for a typical homeowner in Ypsilanti. To be clear, taxes have gone up 22% higher despite defeating the income tax and proposals, Water Street proposals in 2007 and 2012. Ouch. This new proposal seeks to increase the taxes even more, beyond the already elevated levels. Skip finds this Water Street tax, this new Water Street tax, to be unwise, unkind, and unnecessary. The proposal is unwise because high taxes degrade property values and long-term fiscal viability. Were the city to double taxes, no one would live here. Property values would be zero, and the city revenue would be zero. There is an optimal balance between securing sustainable revenue for city operations, but still allowing businesses and homeowners to grow equity. As one of the highest tax cities in Michigan, Ypsilanti is on the wrong side of that balance. Draining homeowners' savings and equity is a short-term fix, and Skip is focused on the long term. Certainly there are things Ypsilanti could enjoy more of without the Water Street fiasco, but the past is the past, and the wise policy now is to manage the fallout while keeping taxes reasonable. Secondly, this proposal is unkind. Higher property taxes hurt lower and fixed income families. Median household income in Ypsilanti is only $33,000. For most, even a couple of $100 in new taxes can be devastating. Many low-income families rent and pay regressive non-homestead taxes through their rent, which are almost 27% higher than homeowners for comparable housing. In simple terms, as taxes go up, rents go up. Please consider the impact of higher taxes on everyone in our community, including our most vulnerable, such as senior citizens on fixed income and low-income residents, before voting to worsen an already regressive tax. Finally, it's unnecessary because tax revenues are increasing in the city as property values increase. With careful management, we can resolve the debt without additional burden on taxpayers. City leaders say they have cut to the bone, but still continue to spend on non-essentials. This includes millions for a train platform, tax breaks to developers, a second pedestrian bridge, unnecessary studies and consultants, and even a new trail on Water Street later deemed unsafe to use due to soil contamination. These are not the decisions of past city leaders, but those serving now. No, our challenge is not a revenue issue, but a priority issue. Unwise, unkind, unnecessary. Despite the challenges, Ypsilanti is better than ever. Home values are up, new businesses are opening, and we're slowly but surely resolving Water Street with creative fiscal management. Let's encourage continued creativity and move forward together in a responsible and sustainable manner. Please vote no on the Water Street Millage on August 7th. Thank you.
I congratulate both sides on keeping to the timing. All right, now I have a couple questions, and then we'll be taking questions from the audience, so you might be thinking about what questions you might want to ask. And each side will have 2 minutes to answer each of these 2 questions. So the first question I will address to the city to start with. How and why did the city incur the debt for the Water Street property?
Well, I wasn't around then, so I can't speak to exactly the why, but the city acquired the almost 30-acre site through a lot of different kind of acquisitions, starting back in 1997. That was before my time in the city as well, and so it bought a lot of property. That is how. The goal initially was to redevelop an area that had been for multiple generations industrial, contaminated industrial, and felt that the continuation of the downtown and the opportunity with our beautiful, amazing historic downtown and along the river, that we didn't want to empty or largely vacant or underutilized industrial kind of wasteland there, that there were a lot of best and highest uses, as you would say. Better and higher uses for the site. So originally the plan was for one mixed-use development. That's what was appropriate in the market at that time. It's not really what's appropriate in the market this time. That would be additional commercial and residential, increase tax base, increase employment opportunities, and increase the utilization of the great assets we already have between downtown, Depot Town, the river, and being right on US 12 Michigan Avenue corridor. So that was the original intent of the project.
All right, thank you. Mr. Pierce. How and why did the city incur the debt for the Water Street property?
Well, I was here when this was started by the city, and it was a plan to in reality to spend taxpayer money, and it had great hope, but it wasn't based on any sort of reality. And the reality is that government is not very good at doing these sort of developments. And so the plan was just to try to bring in other developers and other experts to help do that. But what got the city sort of in a bind is they weren't willing to listen to city residents. A number of residents stood up in 2003 when at that time the city had only spent a couple $1 million on this project and said, whoa, wait a minute, maybe this, as Amanda has said, this single-use development, mono development, isn't the best way to go. And instead of keep plowing money into this project, maybe we should rethink this. But unfortunately, a city council member at the time famously said, we can't stop this project, we've spent too much already. And so, but that time in 2003, it was less than $5 million that the city had spent. And as you just heard from the mayor, she said that by 2006, 2007, they had spent nearly $30 million on this project. And the debt, it was being refinanced, and more payments were being rolled in. And the cities, and still not listening to the voters who are saying, wait, stop pouring more money into this project. So unfortunately, it's gotten ourselves into a bind. And with the vote that we had in 2007, it was hoped that maybe we could get the city to stop spending money on this project and rethink the way that we approach Water Street. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And again, in 2012, that didn't happen. So I'm hopeful that after our discussion this summer about this and the vote in August, that we can have a meaningful discussion about what to do. But we have to stop spending money until we can come up with a real viable plan for Water Street.
All right, thank you. Before I ask the second question, I noticed there are some people standing in the back and there are some chairs up here in front. If anyone would like to have an opportunity to sit down, there are chairs up here. So whatever you feel comfortable with. All right, this is my second question, and then we're going to turn to questions from the audience. This time I will start with you, Mr. Pierce. If the millage fails, what plan would you recommend to the city council?
Well, that's a great question. In 2007, we said, the city said, and the people who were supporting the yes millage, at that time it was the city income tax, said that if this tax does not pass, this income tax didn't pass, that there would cuts in police and fire, and it would be devastating for the community. And we heard the same thing in 2012. That if the millage didn't pass and the income tax didn't pass, remember they were trying to do both back in 2012, there was going to be devastating cuts. We're going to eliminate police and fire, and that didn't happen again. And in fact, they've hired more police and fire since then, and property taxes and revenue is up, and businesses and new businesses are opening in our community. And so a lot of really good things are going on. And so the thing that was missing was after each of those votes, there wasn't a bringing back together of the community. In 2012, we stood up and said, this is not a celebration because the tax was defeated. This was a time for us to come together as a community and have a meaningful discussion about what we're going to do on Water Street. And sadly, in those 4 years, we haven't had that. That's what we need to do. We need to come together as a community and say, look, we can't keep blaming the past, all right? It's done. But what we can do is figure out what we're going to do to pay off the debt and how we're going to do that will best benefit the entire community. Because I contend that with this, as I said, 22% taxes going up, even when this was defeated in 2012, and now we're looking at 2.3 mils here and another 5.6 mil increase just in this year, it is unsustainable. And so I think we've got to come up with a different approach. And I really do hope that we can come together as a community and have a real honest dialogue about what to do for Water Street.
All right, thank you. Mayor?
We have a council very frequently, pretty much every meeting, honest dialogues about what to do about Water Street. And we are eager to stop having those dialogues and put it behind us so that we can have dialogues about a lot of other important matters in the city. So we've looked at and considered any and every kind of option forward, and that's why we came together on this one, because the reality, our reserves are, so our savings account, so to speak, as a city, are in the range right now of $5.3 million, right? So maybe that seems like, oh, we got a whole lot of money, you use all that. But we have to keep our reserves at certain levels because sort of state requirements. Your reserves have to be at a certain level. It has to be able to pay all of your payouts that are due to all employees, like if you close your doors today as a city, et cetera, plus a certain percentage of your overall. So we really, if we look at the requirement from the state of unallocated dollars in reserve, we have basically 2 years before we go below that. That's a whole different situation if we do not pass this millage that we can't be in, and it will really harm the city. So we do have to look at drastic cuts, and we did have to do drastic cuts, and we are finally starting to recover from them in police and fire. But we've been able to leverage grant dollars like the SAFER grant that's allowed us to have staffing for the fire department that will run out. There's not opportunities just to keep getting that and keep getting that. And that will mean that those that many more firefighters are cut. So we're going to have to look across police and fire, across our entire city staff. We've been able to make that investment in the future, begin to build back up our planning and economic development department, because we can't move forward with economic development in our community with no staff. And we were down to a very, very, very bare bones staff, and that made it really hard to try to find new tenants or redevelopment for our empty, mostly empty Ford plant or motor wheel or buildable sites that we have in the community. We're finally able to do that, and those are exactly the places we're going to have to look to cut as we look at this kind of fiscal cliff we may get near falling off. Thank you.
All right, now it's time for you to have an opportunity to ask questions. So if you please go to the mic and line up in the order that you'd like to be called on.
All right, don't cry.
Okay, now, those of you who are at the mic, I'm going to ask you if you can see the timer when she holds up the panel. Okay, so you'll get a 30-second warning, and then you'll be asked to stop, and I will also ask you if necessary. So, glad to have questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. We have about 35 minutes for questions, and when that time is up, then we will have to stop because it'll be time for our closing statements. All right, so, sir, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes. According to a June 2015 article in the Ann Arbor News, the Ipsy City manager lost track of $1.2 million in the budget. That's a disturbing amount of money to lose track of. And if this is true, how can we trust city estimates when it makes a case for higher taxes?
All right. Mayor?
I don't have that article in front of me, so I can't reference that specifically, but we have all sorts of lively debate at our city council about a budget. I don't know if you've ever gone through it. I have. It's this thick, and so there's lots of interpretation when we're especially going through the budget process, which we were in May and June, for probably a total of about 18 hours worth of meetings. And so, of course, our press picks up on key buzzwords and statements, etc. So that was something that probably a council person said during a heated discussion. But our city has repeatedly been awarded, I don't know the terms, fiscal responsibility awards. I didn't know there were so many, but our city manager and our finance director continue to get rewards for clean audits, for good budget processes, et cetera, et cetera. So we feel really good. We know that we lost our previous city manager to the state because we had been so good at that fiscal management. And these independent auditors who continue to come into our city and look at the way we do our books have continued to tell us that we do them really well. So I can't speak to exactly what you're talking to about which comment that was during which of those 18 hours of budget meetings, but we feel solidly about the budget that we just passed, and we have a clear understanding. And while we're working to get that understanding of what's being presented to us, sometimes we're asking hard questions like that, and that's what, of course, our city administration responds to us.
All right. Mr. Pierce, did you want to comment?
If that's appropriate.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I did read that article that was in the newspaper, and it was disturbing because it wasn't just a matter of misinterpreting what was in the budget. But this is not the only thing that we've heard. We heard from the economic director here just recently that said that the city didn't, and this is a quote, the city previously didn't track local economic data, so it's difficult to find numbers to illustrate growth. That's really shocking to me that economic development in the city over the last 15 years has not been trying to keep track of this data that we keep saying that the city is improving. And if we're not minding the P's and Q's of the budget and how the money is being spent. And if you look, this is really shocking when I saw this in the budget, that the city has spent about $3 million more in the last couple of years annually in budget than they had 2 or 3 years before that. And if there's $3 million more being spent in the budget, that's money that, because we still provided the same police and fire, and we plowed the streets, and we picked up the garbage, and we mowed the parks. And so if there's that sort of revenue growth within the city, that's the time to be saving money and putting that towards paying down the debt and being fiscally responsible. It's hard. I understand that, because you want to do so many other things for the city. There's so many other people that are clamoring for things to do, whether it's for senior centers or for parks or for playscapes or any of those other things. I understand that. But really, that we are in a tough fiscal position right now, and that's the time when you slot away the money and pay the debt. Because once this is paid off, in 2007, if we had done the things that we talked about during that campaign for the city to be fiscally responsible, the debt would have been virtually paid off today, 9 years later.
All right, thank you. Now we will have a second question. Yes, sir.
Yes, pension and health costs for policemen and firemen are a large part of city outlays. What is your plan to create a sustainable retirement system?
Mayor?
So that's one of those other costs that cities are kind of inherit, right? The police and fire pension costs. And so you can't do a lot about what's already happened. And that is a thing that is across every municipality around that has those legacy costs. But what we've been able to do is move to a system, a two-tier system for new hires, and it's greatly saved funds. So for new people who come in, as we have retirements, we also did quite a bit of early kind of retirements and buyouts, so people weren't there as long and accumulating as much. And so that was one of the things that we did in the last few years that really saved quite a bit of money. That's one of those sort of pinching times. One of the reasons, just to note from what Mr. Pierce just said, that we had a larger expenditures in the last couple of years is because we were paying down extra parts of that debt. So that's where that change wasn't that we were suddenly flush and doing lots of new fun things. Plenty of new fun things we'd all like to do. We'd like to be able to invest more in some of the things he mentioned, but we were actually paying down that debt, because the more principal we were able to pay down with our refinance, the better rate that we were able to get. So that's actually where that change went, was to get that debt down, and focus exactly on that. We knew we were taking more hit by doing that, but getting the debt smaller in the end is really the end goal, and the end goal of voting yes as well.
Mr. Pierce?
The pensions and those legacy costs are really the cliff that is putting our community most at risk. It's not Water Street debt. And if you look at if you study your property taxes, you'll notice that the millage has been going up almost every year to pay for pensions, and we don't get to vote on that. That's a millage increase that is just put on by City Council to cover that ever increasing debt or obligation for pensions. And we do have a commitment, and I stand by the commitment. I think everybody in our community does stand by that commitment and that promise that we made to employees in the past for pensions and retirement and health care. But what we really need to do is change the way that we do, not just the two-tier system. We really need to change the entire way that we do pensions and benefits, and change that method for new hires so that we can get away from this obligation to going to 401ks and similar types of retirement programs like we've seen in the auto industry, like we've seen in business, like we've seen at the universities. They have all changed their obligations and pension systems in the last 10 years. The city has been very slow to do that, and that has cost us literally millions and millions of dollars in additional obligations that we will have to pay for decades. And so this would be one of those things that we said back in 2007 needs to be done. The city, I think, did some very good job in nibbling around the edges of doing that, but not really making that real decision to say, we're going to change the way that we do pensions and support for employees in our community because we simply don't have a sustainable model. We are only 4.3 square miles of 20,000 people, and when you have more pensioners than you have active city employees, there's no way to pay the debt and the obligation.
Thank you. All right, next question.
I understand the city bought Water Street about 20 years ago, but last November, the city paid $50,000 to have a soil study of Water Street done, and it determined that it contained hazardous substances such as lead, arsenic, and mercury that were 10 to 40 times higher than the state allows. Such studies seem commonplace when purchasing property. So why weren't these things discovered earlier? How much was spent on previous studies that turned out to be wrong? And how much more will be spent in the future?
Mayor?
So Water Street was acquired knowing it was a brownfield, right? A contaminated site. So it's been contaminated since the beginning. And there have been, it's a big site, right? They're in the range of 30 acres. So there have been studies since the beginning. There have been studies of different levels, right? So you have a big site and you have different kinds of development that may happen in different parts of it. So you're not going to go do soil sample in every square foot unless you have $1 bazillion million. And so there have been studies, but when we get to a different point of development, so depending on your use, you need to do different kinds of cleanup, or different sort of contaminants have to be dealt with in different ways. A residential use or a park use are some of the highest uses. If you're doing light industrial or commercial, it's different uses. So as you move through the development process, as we have with different potential developers, we then go and do more investigation. So we've done a number of series of investigations over all time, and I don't know what that total has been. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but that's sort of as you would progress in any brownfield project like this, especially a big complicated one. And we have also seen over time, because it's, as you said, been almost 20 years, some of those standards have even changed. So some things that in previous studies where we knew what they were in acceptable levels for whatever that use was. When we retested, as you do, because things also shift in the soil and contamination change, where it is, how it is, what needs to be dealt with over that time. Some of those things where we retested were at levels that then were deemed unacceptable because the standards changed in that time. So it's a sort of big, it's not some easy answer. I mean, except for that, yes, Water Street is a contaminated brownfield, and that's why people can develop on it in a financially viable way, because they use brownfield tax credits. So it's always been contaminated, it is still contaminated, and different amounts in different spots. And some spots are pretty clean, and some spots are pretty dirty, and there's sort of everything in between. So that's the answer to that question.
Mr. Pierce?
You know, earlier I said that what is past, and we have to move forward and move. But at the same time, this reminds me that we do have to know how we got to where we are today. And remember I said that in 2003, a number of citizens stood up and said, quit spending money on Water Street until we've got a viable plan. Those same citizens, and these were people who were economic development experts and environmental experts, people that lived here in the city, and some of them were world-class experts who happened to be our neighbors. And they were shocked when the city started to acquire the property and advised the city and the city council and the legal folks to not take on the environmental liability for that property. And unfortunately, the city did. As part of the negotiating process, they paid millions of dollars for the land and then took on and excused the environmental liability from all of those owners. No wonder why they were so willing to sell that property. But that's the legacy that we're left dealing with. Is because that got us into one heck of a bind on that property. And so, how do we go forward from there? You know, I remember when the city council, when it came out, MISHTA said, oh, there's all this environmental stuff, and the first reaction from the city was, MISHTA's wrong. They don't have their facts right, they've gotten all of this information, and they're wrong. Then they come and do the $50,000 study, and it's a little bit quieter, and it says, yeah, Mr. Kissler had it right, and there's more than we knew. Well, that's what, I think that's a fundamental thing we need to change at City Hall and at City Council, is instead of being so defensive about this, instead say, good point, let's find out and let's go back and look at what we studied. What is Mr. telling us? What are the other experts telling us? And then say, here's what we know today.
All
That
right,
would have been
thank you.
much better for our community.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. All right, next question.
I think Mr. Pierce had mentioned this is a way forward, and I think a lot of us here in Eastern believe that this millage is a way forward. It's going to allow for a little bit of taxes that we can actually use on safety, and for us at Eastern, that's really critical. We took a lot of the burden in providing safety to our community and paying for safety and having some resources that the city would have. So that said, I thought this millage was not a tax increase, it's a tax neutral. So we keep saying it's a tax increase, but we understood it to be completely tax neutral. Can you clarify that?
Mayor?
You can start.
Okay.
I don't mean to be so excited about this.
Yeah.
This is a tax increase. And why it's a tax increase is because what the city promised us in 2001. When the city came forward and said, we need to raise the money in order to pay for our roads. We're not getting funding from Lansing. Wow, here's a pattern here. We're not getting these things. We need to take care of ourselves. We taxed ourselves with this road millage, and it's about 4.6 mils, 2.3 now and 2.3 in a couple of years expires. And that was a 15-year promise from the citizens of Ypsilanti to pay that debt, and it was temporary. Remember what everybody on city council and everybody else said at that time. This is a temporary tax. It's going to go away in 15 years. Well, guess what? 15 years is this year. It goes away. So if nothing happened, our taxes will go down in 2017. So this millage increase in here means that our taxes go back up 2.3 mils. So that's a tax increase. And it's real simple to think about this. If you vote no and the no side is successful in August, in 2017, your property taxes will go down 2.3 mils. And so if a no vote means your taxes go down, I'll let you answer the question, what happens if you vote yes?
Mayor?
You know, first I appreciate your answer. You know, I'm a new resident to Ypsilanti in many ways. I only came here about 2 years ago. I went to school here at Ypsilanti, here at Eastern. And but one of the things that I continue to hear through our discussions is what is in the past is the past. But all we've sort of really been talking about is the past. And for me as a new resident, I want to talk about what is the future. And when I look at this millage, and when I look at our ability to be able to, since this is not a tax increase, I look at this as an ability to be able to move us forward, to be able to move us forward into the future so we can have a talk about how we're going to increase funding for police and for fire and for our public parks, because that's why I moved here, because I could look at our city administration, I could look at the city, and I had confidence. And that's something that I continue to have. So for me, I don't see this as you know, just putting money in a black hole. I see this as an investment. So for me, the continuation and the asking of us to take this on is appropriate, and I hope that we do.
Thank you.
Are we going through 2 minutes? No. Can I finish up? Okay, so, and to further answer Ms. Alexander's question, so your taxes would say, you're right, if it doesn't pass, your taxes would go down, and our city's coffers would continue to go down, and it's unclear what would happen after that to our property tax values, to our overall condition as a city. And this would keep those taxes neutral. That 2011 road millage that's rolling off is for local streets projects that were done in a few-year period after that. 2001 local streets. That's what's rolling off. And those streets are well maintained. Those are our local streets. And they have about a 25-year life. So we have a lot of years left of life in those streets with a maintenance plan that we're working and funding for that.
Okay,
So we're
thank you.
pleased with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next question.
One of the most basic points of contention between SCIT and the city in this debate that's arisen repeatedly and actually was just covered in this last question is whether or not this constitutes a tax increase. SCIT has been telling us that this is a tax increase, and the city has been replying that it's not, because the proposed millage will replace an expiring road millage. Everyone here has got here by driving over Ypsilanti city roads, and I think we're all pretty well aware that the local suspension shops are doing okay. So my question to the city is this: given that the millage was there for road maintenance, do you think it would be appropriate if this juncture to decrease spending on road maintenance relative to what we have now. And I'd like to address this to the city council members who are present. Would you be willing to pledge, if this passes, not to
Okay,
bring another road
that's the
building
end of
so
your
it's appropriate to
question
call this
time.
not a tax increase?
I'm sorry, sir, your question time is up.
So what we're paying for now that's rolling off is work that was again done 15 years ago, between 15 and 12 years ago. So this is not rolling off something that's paying for maintenance now. That comes from different funding, from Act 81, from funding that comes from ATFF, lots of acronyms in the world, through Watts, etc. So our current road maintenance of our local streets, we have categories of streets. Some are local streets, some are called major streets, and they come from different funding sources. So this is not changing any funding that is maintaining roads or any future projects with our major streets, which are some that need some more work. The money that's coming from what the state legislature did finally fund, which will get up and by 2020-21 to about $1 million a year, we think is adequate to fund our major streets and some of the work that needs to be done on that. So we're getting that state funding that's from the gas tax, etc., that is helping us with those roads that are having the suspension eating things.
Mr. Pierce?
I agree that we should be talking about what we're going to do going forward. And the promise was made in 2001 and 2003 that this was going to be a temporary tax. And it's much like buying a car or leasing a car. And if you buying a car and you're making that payments every for 5 years, and you get down to that last payment, and if the car dealership or the car manufacturer said, "Oh, bad news, we need a little bit more money. We want you to still keep paying on that car." And honest, we're not increasing the amount of money that you're paying for the car. It's the same that you were paying last month. No, it's not. You know, we were budgeting and planning that we were going to have a tax decrease coming in 2017. That's the promise that the city made to the voters if the voters were willing to pay that temporary millage to improve the roads. And so I want to encourage our current leaders to keep that promise and let this millage expire and have, for the first time in over 10 years, a decrease in our property taxes. Because remember what I said, even when the property, in the millages and the income tax got defeated in 2007 and 2012, our property taxes went up, what did I say, 22%, to some 10 mils, and we're doing another 5 mil increase this year, 1.5 for ISD, plus we've got roads coming up in November, which is 0.5 and 1.3 for regional transportation. It's 5.6 new mills this year that the council has all said that they're going to support. Some of these are county-wide ones. And so, you know, with regional transportation and this road millage. So what are we going to do to keep our promises to the voters that this was a temporary tax?
All right, thank you, Mr. Pierce. The next questioner.
I would just like to note that Mayor Evans did not responsibly answer my yes or no.
I'm sorry, sir, your time is up. And now I have the next question, please.
Hi. In March 2016, Councilmember Pete Murdoch made a FOIA request because Ypsilanti's own city manager would not share information on a proposed train stop with his employer, City Council. The city then charged Councilmember Murdoch $400 for the request. Given this environment of obvious infighting and friction, how can we trust what the city manager says about budgets and financial matters, including Water Street?
Mayor?
Well, I thought you were going to point more to the disagreement on the city council about that FOIA, and I was going to respond that isn't it great that this is something we actually all agree on? Because we don't all agree on everything, and that's how I would want it in a democracy overall, that we're at a table and that we can come together when there's issues that we really need. And again, I'll point just right back to, we have lively debate at our council table. I invite you all to come and join and watch that anytime you'd like. But we continue from a management perspective to be by independent auditors rated in strong fiscal and financial management. So ask the auditors why they're doing that, and come see those awards we get over and over and over in that way.
Mr. Pierce?
this is a great question, because when we all read in the newspaper and saw and heard on WEMU that a city council member was having to FOIA the city for information, those of us that have been sitting on the outside, and many of you are here in the audience today, who have been asking these questions of our city, of how money is being spent, where it's being spent, and how those decisions have been made, have all run into this same wall. That if you want the answers to that question, 9 times out of 10, that response is going to cost you. You're going to have to pay for a FOIA to get that information out of City Hall. And sometimes those FOIA requests can be thousands of dollars. And all that really is doing, it's not trying to cover the costs of duplicating or getting the records about environmental cleanups. It really is just a barrier of, it's ours, we don't really want to tell you what we're doing at City Hall. And I think it just sort of came to a head when it had to be a city council member did the same thing. But that city council member, and as well as many people here in the audience who do go to those council meetings on a regular basis and are asking these questions in neighborhood association meetings and in town councils and in our churches about what's going on in the city, we'd like to get answers. And this is what I said earlier, is instead of being so defensive and saying, that's going to cost you to get that answer, I think, or Mishta's wrong or something like that, I think it would be a lot better to moving this discussion forward if the response was, that's a great question, let me see what I can do to get the answer. And then, when you get that answer for one person, put it up on the website so the rest of us can see it. And share that information with the entire community. It would be a huge benefit for the community and a benefit for the city in open government, in open governance. Thank you.
Next question.
This is for Mr. McGadney. What exactly did the city show Congressman Irving that encouraged him to come down on the side of the city for this millage? Why are they supporting it?
Oh, I'm sorry, this is my So to clarify, I work in my capacity for Representative Irwin, but Representative Irwin has not given any opinion to me privately or in public about this millage. I can tell you why I'm supportive of it. I'm very comfortable doing that. Because like I said before, that this to me is an investment in our future. And to me, I want our city to have the tools and the ability to be able to make the investments, to be able to put money into police and fire in our parks. So for me, I give it my endorsement, and I'm happy to do that, and that's why I'm here today.
Thank you.
Next question.
So I am one of the mythical unicorns of an undecided voter. We really do exist. So, but my question is to the city, but I would like the opposition to please answer it as well. So talking about the future, the city manager has been quoted multiple times as saying he will be very, very aggressive in marketing these properties for the Water Street sale, which then makes me very concerned about the planning of what's going to happen at Water Street. Case in point of, some might say, a giveaway to this project that was recently approved. So I would like to hear what the city's plan is for, if this millage is passed, how they will create a good space in our city, and what the plan going forward for Water Street will be, and if they can assure us that there will be no giveaways of this property to the first buyer that comes available. Thank you.
Mayor?
So before my time, there were some developers that came forward, at a point where the economy was down and the city did feel in some ways more sort of desperate, and the council that I was not part of at the time said no to some properties. So we have a number of projects, a number of potential things that, until it gets to the point where it's a thing, you can't talk about publicly, that are projects that we think are beneficial to the community. So whether it is housing and commercial development or another kind of development, in general, still mixed use, mix of housing, mix of commercial, etc., is what the vision for. That's what came out from our community in the Shape Ipsy master plan, and people can reference, is that continuation of downtown, that really mix of services offered to the broad mix of who we are as a community now and who we want to attract further as a community. So that still is what we're doing, and we look at each parcel, each decision. But in terms of the question about giveaways, The way it works in development, everywhere you are, is that you offer someone, right? They're debating between coming to here and going to Corktown and Detroit or downtown Ann Arbor, and so you put together packages, and those are incentives with brownfields, and those are tax credits, and those are a lot of different things. That is how development works, and that's the reality of how development, especially in a place like Ypsi, has to work, where our market isn't as hot as Ann Arbor, right? It's a different market. And so what's a challenge is that when we have developers who are comparing us to Detroit, for instance, they actually have a lot more incentives or giveaways than we do. So we have a fairly small toolbox, and so we sell them on all the good that's happening in our community overall. But yes, that's going to continue to be part of packages because that is how you do development. If you look at any development anywhere in the state and across the country, that is part of it. It's less part of it in downtown Ann Arbor, where it's a whole different market. But any, especially formerly distressed community or community on the rise, that is what you do. And those brownfield tax credits are some of the first and major pieces that have always been a part of the plan to incentivize development.
Mr. Pierce?
Well, you're not the only unicorn that I've met in the last couple of weeks, because there's a lot of people that are undecided about this. And I think it shows a passion and a concern for our community, because when you hear things about cutting police and fire and not picking up trash and those sort of things, one at a city council meeting, or not at one of these forums that the city has been hosting in the neighborhoods, where a city council member said that we used to have 54 officers and now we're down to 30. Well, you know, the truth of the matter is we never were at that high of level, but it sounds bad. If you're an undecided voter and you go, geez, we've eliminated all these officers and the stats say that we need to have more officers on the street, I guess we need to vote for this. And unfortunately, a lot of these things are you know, it takes a little bit more than 30 seconds to be able to describe it. But here's the thing to take away from that is we owe, the city owes about $20 million. Is that right? $20 million?
Now 14.
And now got down to $14 million. Boy, I'm liking this already. But with the $14 million debt, how much development needs to be on this property in order to pay off that debt? Well, I can tell you the answer. We need to have $100 million of new development on that property in order to make the payment. That's shocking, because there's no way we can get $100 million of development on there. And so what we hear is, well, if we give away the taxes and the tax credit and the revenue here, that'll bring in that next developer. We're always going to try to make it on the next developer. Well, that last developer on this project is going to have to pay $98 million in order for this plan to work. That's not reasonable, and that's why I think we need to get away from this thing of saying everybody else is doing it, we have to give away these tax credits. We don't. We could actually just say, leave it as a field, because it won't cost us anything different. If we're not getting any revenue off the development, then leave it in empty. It's the same thing.
Your time is up. Okay, we have time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm not a mythical unicorn. I kind of know, a little bit about all of this, but I'm looking to move into the city, and everybody's been talking a lot about, businesses and development and things like that. But I want to know from a residential standpoint, we talk about the increase in taxes and how it lowers your property values and things like that. I want to know, what's going to entice me to buy in the city when the taxes are significantly more expensive than I pay in other areas, and how that's going to, if this increase does happen, how that's going to affect me as a potential buyer or someone who owns property in the city already.
Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem often says that Ypsilanti is the best kept secret in Southeast Michigan. And that high tax rate is our reality. It is what we deal with, and again, that's why we're keeping it neutral. The council would not have supported doing this if it net raised the council. And just to clarify, the council did not vote to support the Washington County road millage, very specifically. So there's not been a council support of that. We have voted to support people doing the RTA millage because that is further economic development and dollars into our community. So to answer your question, you moved to Ypsi because there's a great walkable community, and there's a great sense of community, and there's beautiful historic architecture, and there's a strong, there's great neighborhoods all around, and there's amenities, and there's a pop-in downtown and Depot Town, and West Cross is really redeveloping, and there's a beautiful river that you can walk to, and not so far from a whole, entire community, and Olmsted design parks. And those are the amenities that you're paying for in the community. And that if we pass this, we're able to keep that very, very short police and fire response time. Our fire response time is in a very short few minutes, so that when we have emergencies in our communities, you can have the help that you need right away. That's what we're paying for, and that's what we need to keep by voting yes for this, so that we can have those and then start investing further in the future and in investing more in our parks and building out those assets that we know are why people love to move and come and stay in our community.
Mr. Pierce?
I know, and I've encouraged a lot of people to come to Ypsilanti because I am new to Ypsilanti. I moved here in '99, which means it's now been 16 years. And when I came to Ypsilanti, property taxes were about 35% lower when I came here in '99. And so that's a real shock to somebody who is coming to this community for the first time. Because you see all the great things that the mayor talked about. That was the things that attracted my wife and I to come here to Ypsilanti, were those great things. But when it comes down to buying a home, that's the single biggest decision that most people will ever make. And if your neighbors warned you about this, they'll say you need to look at the property taxes. And I've talked to people time and time again who said, Steve, I want to live in Ypsilanti, but the property taxes are going to be higher than my mortgage payment. And you sort of think that in for a moment. It says, is that really true? And it is. That the property taxes will be more each month going to pay for city services than what you pay for your mortgage. And so as a first-time buyer like you, who's looking at the city, it says, I could spend that same dollar and have more of that dollar go into equity and into my home if I bought in the township or in Ann Arbor or somewhere in the surrounding community than buying in the city. And so that's the challenge that we face. And that's why we're not saying that we just want to cut taxes and cut services. That's not what we're about. What we're saying is stop increasing the taxes. Just leave it where it is right now. Deal with the budget as we have right now, and we will get through this. We can pay off this Water Street debt with what we have right now. It won't be easy, but once it's done, and then we can go move on. But if we don't do that, we're going to be right back here 3 years from now saying, please vote for another tax increase.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce.
Thanks for the question.
All right, we are now at the point where we're going to have closing statements by each side. And based on drawing numbers before the forum, Skip will go first. Mr. Pierce, 4 minutes.
Well, first, I want to thank you for moderating this. You've done just an absolutely wonderful job. And I want to thank everybody here tonight for coming and listening about this. And I hope this is not the only conversation we have. That's what's really important about what we're doing here tonight. This is democracy. This is our community and our love for our community. And I do want to thank the mayor and Jelani for also coming tonight. This vote on August the 2nd is a chance for our voice to be heard. We've heard from the experts, we've heard from the consultants, we've heard from our elected officials who've all said that this is what we think we should do in our community. Now on August the 2nd, we get to stand up and have a vote and say, this is what we want. And I want to go back for a moment and talk about something that the mayor had brought up about coming to city council and lively debates and encouraging people to do that. I encourage that too, because that's where change will come about. But also, we need to stand up in the ballot booth and say, you know, sometimes you're not listening. And I remember a meeting a couple years ago where every single citizen at a city council meeting came before city council and said, don't build a dollar store on Water Street. And we got a dollar store. And then citizens came before city council and said, don't build publicly funded subsidized housing on Water Street. And we just found that the city gave away $750,000 in tax credits for a low-income housing, sustainable housing on Water Street. The voters, we're hearing from this time and time again, they're saying that city council is not listening. I don't believe that's true, but I think sometimes you get so focused on trying to deal with that budget book that's this big and trying to figure out how you're going to solve the problem of getting a new garbage truck and doing all of those things that are so important as part of being a community leader and an elected official, that sometimes that our elected officials aren't quite listening to what the voters are saying. The voters are saying, and said in these last 2 elections, is that we're paying some incredibly high taxes. We love our community. And we don't want to move. We want to encourage more people to come into this community. And we know that we could be more competitive if we just cut taxes. It's absolutely true. If we could lower our taxes below township in Ann Arbor, we wouldn't have to give away tax benefits. They would come right to our door. But the reality is we can't do that right now. But if we stay the course, pay the debt down, and get this Water Street problem solved without additional tax increases, we can get through this. And as I said before, if we made those hard decisions in 2007, when this issue first came up, we would be so close to having this solved today. And we can still do this if we start today and say, we want to change the way that what we do on Water Street. Finally, it doesn't matter at all whether you're for this property millage increase or against. The most important thing is go vote. That really is the most important thing. And not just you, but also your neighbors. Talk with your neighbors and share with them on Facebook and everything else. And remind them that this is an important election. And this issue is on the back of the ballot. So if you want to vote on this issue, got to flip the ballot over, come all the way down to the bottom. But no matter what, come vote, and we'll see you at the polls on the 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. All right, Mayor Edwards, you have 4 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for being here. If I could say anything, I would like to echo your opening comments by thanking the League of Women Voters and for everybody who's either asked a question and for those who have come in attendance for participating. He is right in saying that this is how our democracy works, and it is by us coming together. But in the spirit of coming together, I would also like us to come together not just in this room, but in the ballot box, and being able to vote yes on this millage. I hear him, the statements that have been made about what happened in 2007, and at least for me when I was in 2007, I was a freshman here at Eastern Michigan University trying to get A's on my grades, and on occasion it worked out. So for me, I look at this plan and I listen to the mayor and I've spoken with our city council members, and this is a solution. Tonight, this is the only solution that has been discussed. This is the only solution that has been put on the table. And that's something very important, because when we are having a debate, it is always best that if we do not agree with one side, then we have a solution to pair it with, so that we can have a further discussion about what is meaningful and what will move us forward. Tonight, the only solution that's been offered is the one that has been offered by our mayor and by our city council. This solution will allow us to, as I've said before, invest in our police and our fire and our parks, because I can tell you, I do go to our parks, and I know some of our police officers, and God forbid something happens, that a fire happens, I want somebody to be able to rush into my home and drag me out. Our ability and our city's ability to be nimble, to be thoughtful, to have the mechanisms to move us forward is going to be on the basis of this millage. I am not somebody who believes in discussing doom and gloom, because ultimately I believe that we do have a positive future. But I also know what happens when cities do start having to cut and to cut and to cut. In my day job, I work in Lansing. I know what happens when cities go into bankruptcy, insolvency, or experience emergency managers. Those are not solutions that Ypsilanti should or needs to experience, because those solutions, from my understanding and from the way I have seen things, have not produced a brighter future for those communities, some of which I've worked in. So that's why I'm going to take the chance, and I'm going to vote for this millage. And that's why I can have confidence in this mayor and this city council, and I'm trying to convince our residents to move forward. Thank you.
Do you have anything further you wanted to add, Mayor? Or you...
got a whole minute and 30 seconds.
I just want to paint the numbers again then. We have still at this point in the range of, getting my sheet, in the range of, we've gotten our debt payments down from $1.38 million a year, again about 10% of our budget, down to $924,000. We were able, through our pay down, again that was the reason for our increased expenditures in the last year, both the pay down, the smart management by our city manager, and some luck with low interest rates, go from 6.1% interest, 6.16% interest to 3.33% interest. That is really, really exciting. But we still can't carry near $1 million of debt a year with a $14 million budget. We just can't carry that any longer, and we can't take away the rest of our reserves and savings account. And we have cut and cut and cut and cut. We're not going to have $100 million of investment on Water Street. We can't do it through that method. We've got to figure out a way to get rid of this debt, to pay down most of it with the 2.8, the millage that we're asking, 2.3 mils, excuse me, will bring in between $600,000 and $700,000 a year, and so we'll have a payment still in the $300,000 to $400,000 a year range, and that is something we can manage on a $14 million budget as we continue to be conservative with the things we've done, like moved our retirees to a different Medicare plan. Our conversion to LED streetlights is saving us lots of money, and the time is up, so I say thank you and say yes, vote yes.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, I want to say a couple things about the upcoming election. Number one, next Tuesday is the last day to register, so if you haven't already registered to vote, be sure you do it by Tuesday.
And there are forms at the table outside.
Oh, thank you. There's a form that you can fill out to register to vote at the table outside, and the league will see that it gets to the clerk. Also in Michigan, former felons are eligible to vote, which is important. The election, the primary election, is on August 2nd, and don't forget to participate. I want to thank our speakers for their stellar presentations. I want to thank the Chamber for co-sponsoring with us, and I want to thank you, the members of the audience, and somebody is thinking I need to make another announcement. Is that right, Shoshana?
The upcoming debate.
Oh, you want to talk about the upcoming debates? Yes, would you please come up here and tell about the upcoming debates? Thank you.
We are still working on some of the details, but on July 18th, we will be, the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area will be having a candidates forum on both candidates running for the primary for Ward 2 and Ward 3. And on the 26th of July, that's a Tuesday, it'll be these 6 candidates running for the Democratic primary for the 54th District of the Michigan State House. So stay tuned for more information on that as it evolves.
Thank you, Shoshana, for reminding me of that important information. Thank you all for coming. Good evening.